Welcome back, everyone. This is the part two of the interview masterclass, and we will discuss in this chapter about different levels of interviewing, and then we'll go into the depth of what is advanced interviewing and how to be a pro interviewer that nobody else, about like 95% of the people, fail to be. So this is what's going to differentiate you on the interview day from everybody else, and is going to create a starking contrast, to be honest. So let's talk about interviewing. Okay, there's different levels of interviewing. The first level of interviewing is called the beginner level, and the thing with beginners is these people really just know a few basic answers and they just show up and they really hope we don't mess up. Like there's like they're trying to avoid all the questions that can you know be problematic to them, so they're trying to not speak a lot of the times, and they're just being like, okay, I'll try to get through this interview, try to make it to the end, and I hope I get matched. Most of these people will never match because they do not show different aspects of their personality because they're just too afraid to do it, number one. And number two, like the PD and anybody who's interviewing you does know that if you're little bit too shy, well, that's not gonna look good for the residency, because you're gonna do the same thing there with the patients. You can't just be like, I can't talk to the patient because I'm shy, right? I can't talk to the family because I'm shy. You can't do that, right? The intermediate level is what I feel like most people are at. So these people know their answers well, and they will deliver a nice Q&A session. So what do I mean by that? So there comes a list of all the questions that you're asked during an interview, and a lot of people just write their answers down, memorize it to their heart, and go vomit the same answers on the interview day. A big issue with this like style of interviewing is it makes up for a good Q&A session, not particularly a connection. What really is happening is the interviewer asks the person a question, and what will happen is the person is going to give the answer, and the interviewer is going to ask another question, and they're going to give the answer, but there is no particular connection that's happening between the interviewer and the interviewee, which is right where most people, like where the biggest pitfall is. Advanced interviewing here makes a difference by making the interview invisible. What do I mean by that? Making the interview invisible is all about taking out all the distractions and creating pure connection, right? And the way you do that is not by delivering a Q&A session, but by rather creating a conversation where it's just not Q&A, it's QA, and then you ask a question and then there's an answer. So there's a back and forth conversation, which is not particularly a Q&A session, but rather they ask you a question, you answer, but then you can ask a question too if you want, right? And it feels to them that you are actually a part of their family. You are actually somebody who are there having a genuine conversation with, rather than just like platonic, boring, monotonous Q&A sessions, right? People who are good at advanced interviewing, they also create a rather emotional impact. This is what happened with like a lot of my interviews. I would try to be funny, and sometimes the joke would land, sometimes it would not, but the interviewer sure did appreciate my effort, and it rather, like, even the jokes that failed created a connection because I was trying, right? And they felt that. So understand that you have to be, in a way, like talk to them just as if you were talking to a colleague you knew, like in any work environment, who is like pretty much more friendly rather than just formal talks. So just please know that. You also need to try to inspire the interviewer, and this is a phrase that somebody taught me. You don't need to be inspirational to inspire people. All you need to do is be inspired, right? Because when you are inspired yourself for a particular specialty and you talk with passion for that, the interviewers can see that. For example, in my case, I was on and on about psychiatry. I was like, I've read CBT, I know what psychodynamic psychotherapy, I know this, I know that. So I'd read so much about psychiatry, meditation, right? And even therapy, and whatever you ask me about. I felt I actually, in a way, inspired interviewers, and they were like, I remember one of the PDs actually wrote me a LOI, which is rather like doesn't really happen, but it did happen in my case and a few of my other friends. Like a friend of mine majored in psychiatry, and this a similar thing happened to her. Understand, you need to create a connection, and this is just not platonic conversation if you really want to match into a place. Now, why are emotions and connections so important? And the reason this is so important is, if you look at your life, what do you remember the most, right? What do you remember? What is memorable to you? Is it a maths equation, or a platonic conversation with a stranger, or let's say a monotonous conversation? Or is it those moments of fun, or like the moments of when you celebrated your birthday, or maybe you went to a party and you had fun, you talked to people, you built a genuine connection? And if you're like most people, what you remember most of is moments that struck you in a very emotional or an inspirational way. That's how humans are. And the reason for this is because what we have, like right now, there's a part of brain called the emotional brain, or the limbic system, and our brain gives more priority to whatever the limbic system impulses are over the cortex, and the cortex is something that's brand new. So emotion always takes priority over logic. And if you can inspire or like give genuine emotion to people, like think about stand-up comedians, or think about romantic movies, or movies where like there's comedy, right? The reason you remember a lot of those movies is because the limbic system is what allows, like, that emotion gets primed to a certain information. That's what allows you to remember them, right? Because emotion makes everything memorable. Versus if it's just logical, you're not going to remember it, because your brain isn't just primed to remember it, because it's not incoherent. It's not in coherence with your limbic system, right? Understand, we are primates, and our limbic system protects us. It either sees like a positive emotion which will make it memorable, or a negative emotion. For example, if you ever got into a big mess or a big problem, that is a very memorable part. Any kind of fear, for example, you were struggling with something maybe during exams, you would remember that, because both positive and negative emotions make information memorable. Whatever doesn't come like outside of this emotional range that I'm showing you, well, that doesn't get remembered because it is too monotonous, too platonic. An example I can give you is probably any kind of boring lectures you had in college where you didn't even pay attention because it's just so boring, versus a teacher who was just so funny, inspirational, whatnot, and you remember that. So remember, your reticular activating system is what filters information. It takes out information that doesn't really matter, and you're okay going into that information with autopilot. You know that you can handle it, versus information that requires a reaction, right? For example, a positive emotion requires a laugh. A positive emotion means something's good is happening. And a negative emotion, so that's a value thing, right? If you see somebody who can probably help you in some way or form, you want to approach them because it creates a positive emotion, which is a signal of value, breaks your reticular activating system, breaks you out of autopilot, and then you approach them and get your chore done with. Threats, for example, if somebody would, like, if some weird person, right, on a street would start running towards you, and you're in this autopilot, you're just walking thinking, and you see this person, you'll break out of autopilot, right? A lot of people live in autopilot, by the way, like their whole lives. But when you see that person running towards you, the stranger, you will start feeling this negative emotion and you will run, right? So it broke, and it became memorable now, because you would have filtered out the rest of the information, like when you were in that street, what was happening. But the only thing you would have remembered filtered in is the negative spike of emotion, which is threat. So understand that in order to stand out in an interview, you have to either create a positive impression or a negative impression. Negative impression, let's not do that. But positive impressions, we need to create that to make the interviewer remember you in a good and positive light, right? Than other people who just had platonic conversations. So becoming advanced. So before I jump into the verbal part of like communication, what we need to understand is that communication isn't just verbal, right? A lot of people think that the way you just like speaking is communication. That is wrong, wrong, wrong. There are so many other parts of communication, such as non-verbal communication, right? Which is a lot of the times ignored upon, which includes confidence, your body language, the way, like, are you closed? Are you being like this? Or are you being like open and trying to express yourself with your hands, right? That's body language, right? And then non-verbal verbal communication, what I mean by that is your vocal factors. Are you nervous while talking, or are you talking in a good, relaxed tone? Makes a difference. Are you talking too fast, or are you talking too slow, or are you talking in the middle, which is the sweet spot? The verbal communication is words and sentences that we use, so we already know that. But in this video, we have to discuss non-verbal communication because a lot of people lack on this. and we should first prioritize that, right? So why do non-verbal skills matter? And this is the reason why. If I were to say you see this comedian giving you laughs, making you cry while laughing, right? You go to their show, you laugh your heart out. And if I were to tell you, man, like just copy his or her whole jokes and let's do a show with you, do you think you would be able to get the same amount of laughter as that comedian? Well, the answer probably is no. The reason for that is when you do comedy, a lot of the times people just don't laugh on what you say, but how you say it. And the comedian probably knows it. Just copying the verbal factors wouldn't make you funny. Like the way you deliver a certain joke makes or breaks the joke. And this is golden in comedy. Understand that a lot of the times you don't laugh on the joke, but rather on the comedian, which is true. So like try to do it and see what the reaction is. So a lot of the times these skills, the way you speak it, talk about it, is it high paced, low paced, how's the rumble in that voice, really makes or breaks the deal, right? Non-verbal communication. Let's talk about non-verbal communication. Recent research shows that non-verbal communication makes up to 60 to 80% of communication in humans. Now, why is that? Like, now I want you to think about this. Language itself is very relatively new. It's just like, I think just 1,000, 2,000 years old, right? While humans have been here for eternity, man. And if you look at animals have been here for so long. And if you see like on this evolutionary scale, language is 1,000 years old, while humans are like an eternity old species, like compared to the 1,000-year-old period, we have evolved to be non-verbal, to have non-verbal communication more than verbal communication. What that really means is if you smile in any country, everybody understands what that smile is. If I become angry, everybody knows what that angry face is. So that kind of communication everybody knows about, even if you weren't taught that language. Number one. Number two, look at animals. Like I've shown you a chimpanzee here. Chimpanzees, how do they communicate? All of these species, how do they communicate, right? The way they communicate is by using nonverbal communication, by making their face in a like go in a certain direction, like getting angry, making those all like different kinds of body movements. So that is what takes the lead, and we have been primed like on this big evolutionary scale to have like non-verbal communication as the forefront of communication, while verbal communication is very new. So when anybody is communicating with you, they rely more on how you're speaking a certain content of information versus what you are saying. For example, if I were to say, hi, my name is Manik, versus hi, my name is Manik, right? That you could see like in the first one I was going in a downward tonality, which made me look more confident, versus in the second one I was going in an upward tonality, which was kind of like questioning myself. Hi, my name is Manik. Is my name Manik, right? A lot of people speak in that uptone, which is kind of like a non-verbal verbal communication, which we will get into later. But the way you speak something is 60 to 80% important in that certain communication than just the words you use. That's why not everybody can be a comedian. That's why not everybody can be an actor, because body language shapes language, and without body language would lose its meaning a lot of the times. Look at my hands. My hands are keeping you entertained right now, right? If I were just to speak like, hi, my name is Manik, it would just be a talking head. How boring would that be? So understand that non-verbal communication, the way I'm showing, okay, my hands are open, I'm here, I don't have a weapon, you're safe right now, right? It shows a lot of things to your brain, which makes you feel far more safer than if I were just talking like this, right? So remember, non-verbal communication makes 60 to 80% of communication, because evolution is slow and we have been primed towards non-verbal communication than verbal communication. This is the most important factor in communication, and the reason I've told you, it's evolutionary psychology. So remember, the how determines the what. Phrasing matters. So what that means is, like, what we can derive from that is the way you phrase something matters. For example, if I were like, and the way I can explain that phrasing is, for example, if I were to ask someone, what should be I scared about your program, versus do you think there is something that you can improve like in this program, right? Which do you think is better? Like first one, no, wrong, is the second one. And the reason that is the case is because the second one is much more softer and doesn't intimidate the other person and it doesn't offend it. First one is like, what should I be scared about your program, versus this both say the same thing. What should I be scared about your program, and what do you think you can improve in the program? In a way, they say the same thing, but the way you frame certain things, the way you phrase it, becomes far more important when you're talking about something. Tonality, for example, let's start talking in this video. My name is Manik, nice to meet you, versus let's start talking in the video. My name is Manik. Oh man, I forgot the rest one. But the way you speak something, like, is it downward tonality or is it upward tonality, right, can show a certain person how you're feeling right now. Because like, if you think about it, when you get nervous, you always go in an upward tonality, right? So right now I'm talking to myself in a camera because I'm just so mean. I don't have nothing else to do, right? Because that's what you do when you have nothing else to do, versus I'm talking to this certain camera and because I have nothing else to do, right? You can see that difference, because the first one was upward tonality, the second one was downward tonality. Your posture matters. For example, if you're trying to talk to the interviewer like this, versus you're comfortable, you're open, right? Your posture will shape how you speak. Like, do you look powerful or do you look weak, like this or this, right? Your body language matters. The way you like put yourself across, right? Like, my hands are here, I'm trying to communicate with my hands are open, no weapons here. So that gives a signal to your interviewer that this person is probably safe to talk to, right? Because this is just evolutionary psychology. Because if my hands were down there, now you're like, what's in this person's hands, right? Because that's our evolutionary brain telling them like, this could be a dangerous thing. This person is just not showing me their hands. They could be lying, they could be having something down there which I don't know about. I should be on red alert, I should be careful, I should shield myself, right? Versus when it's open, right? Confidence matters. Are you talking with all your authenticity? Are you bringing your passion to the table? Are you being open, versus somebody who is just like too worried to be judged by people and too worried to not talk about what he cares about? Congruence, right? The reason this matters, all of this non-verbal communication matters, is because people who detect lies and are experts at that, what they'll look for is the congruence between your verbal communication and your non-verbal communication. So coming onto that, what that means is, if I'm talking to you and I'm using my hand to, let's say talk about the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, the fourth thing, there is this congruence between my body language and my verbal language, right? So that congruence looks good for me and shows that probably I'm not lying. Versus if I were to like first talk about the first thing, the second thing, the third thing, and the fourth thing, who would you trust? The first person who did this, like this, or the person who just talked with his face like that, right? So I hope that made sense. So your body language should support your language in order for that congruence to come in, which builds trust with whoever you are communicating with. So now let's talk about logical levels. So when I was learning about transformative psychology and how to change myself and how to transform into a bigger person, what I came across was something called as logical levels of change. And the way logical levels of change works is from the innermost circle, if you change the innermost circle and if you can affect the innermost circle, it affects every single outer circle that you can see, like every single consecutive outer circle. So if I were to change my identity, for example, there is this guy. So let's think about it, right? Identity versus, so you can see here that there is identity and then there is behaviors, right? So this is a great example from the book Atomic Habits. So in Atomic Habits, what the author says is, let's think about the same person and this person's trying to leave smoking. What do you think would be a better approach to like leave smoking, right? When offered a cigarette, is it the first thing that I don't do cigarettes anymore, right? I don't smoke them, versus I am not a smoker, right? Think about it. The second one probably, because the person identifies that he is not a smoker, versus the first one where he's saying I just don't smoke right now. Why? Because when you say I'm not a smoker, you built into your identity, you have made it really personal about yourself. And if you say I'm not a smoker, it's going to affect your beliefs, your capabilities, your behavior, and the environment you put yourself around. Versus if you're just saying that I don't smoke right now, but inside you're like I'm a smoker, well, the behavior element you can change for a while, but that doesn't affect every single level, because the outer levels don't affect the inner levels. Only the inner levels can affect every single outer level. So if you can just change your identity versus just change the behavior, go for changing your identity, because if you can change that identity, that change will transcend that identity level and go and like go across like every other level, changing them. So if you were to like, let's say exercise, right, it's way better to say that you are a person who is an athlete versus a person who's just exercising. Because when you're taking in the identity of being an athlete, you're affecting your beliefs, your capability, that if you're an athlete, well, you can run, so your capabilities get changed, and the way you behave also changes, versus what you would just say that I just want to exercise, if that makes any sense, right? So when you take it into your identity, that's when the biggest change happens. And what you should really try to invest in is the identity, not just the behavior. So try to talk yourself into that you are a confident person, you know how to talk in an interview, you are pro at interviewing, and that's better than just saying I know how to talk, right? Take in the identity of the pro interviewer, because that's going to change everything, right? Because let's say if I were to think that I'm a nervous guy, and let's say I were to become nervous, you could see that my verbal language gets really bad because my identity has changed, and now I'm kind of scared of the camera. But if I were to take the identity of somebody who is really good at talking, who has charisma, who knows how to get the room pumping, right? Popping, party, yeah. But if I can do that, that will change, create a much bigger change than something just as a behavioral level change. So identity level change over behavioral level change. So remember, the how determines the what. So the way we talk about body language and the tenets of a body language that's warm and that is charismatic, right? So we want our body language to be really open, and the reason we want our body language to be really open is because that is what signals warmth. If I were to talk to you like holding my hands and my arms like this, closing myself up, would you like it? Versus I open myself up, I'm like, hey, what's up? And we are having a conversation, what's better, right? An open body language. So not closed body language. Don't do this. Don't close yourself off. Open yourself up, talk with confidence, and just be you, be authentic, and take up space, right? So remember, take up space, be open. Secondly, be confident and excited but relaxed. You don't need to be freaking shaky all the time. You don't need to be like stuttering, or like you don't need to be showing like, because if you do those things, if you try to be too excited, that comes off as anxious. So just be confident, excited but relaxed. Suave is, I think, the right word to describe it. Next on, use your hands, not too much. I'm using them too much right now, but that's just me. Use your hands, like point them towards the interviewer like this, because you're showing it to them that you don't have a weapon right now. So you're kind of like, hey, peace, let's talk, right? So you're showing it to them, and use your hands to sometimes support whatever you're saying. For example, in the body language, in the body language topic, there's number 1, openness, number 2, confidence but relaxedness, number 3, hands, right? So I'm using my hands to communicate, to facilitate my conversation with you and increasing the intensity of that conversation. Posture, so as straight and tall as possible. Now the way I like to do the posture thing is something with like calibrate it with the Alexander technique. So Alexander technique was developed by this guy who was an Australian actor to just make sure his posture was all right. Because and he like, the reason actors need a really good posture is because if you talk like this, like just look at me, if you talk like this closing yourself off, versus if you talk like this, there's a massive difference. Because if your body language closes, that signals to your voice and your brain that you're nervous, and that makes you less charismatic, right? So what you can do instead is open yourself up and think of a string attached to the vertex of your head, right? Just like you're a puppet, and just pull that string up. So it will straighten up your posture. Do not be rigid, be relaxed, right? Relaxedness, not rigidness. So just think of a string, pull it up, and that's the posture you want to go with. Don't stretch it too much, just relax, be a puppet to that string. It makes it really go really well. No fidgeting, do not talk or do not keep moving like this all the time. No defensive body language like this, because then I don't want to share information with you, man, right? No defensive body language. And like, I think if there's one hack that can get everything all right, is imagine talking with your co-residents, friends, or family, right? So imagine as if you were talking to your co-residents, your friends or family. So what I would do sometimes is, whenever I'm talking to people I don't know, I would imagine my friend, my best friend, like on their face, and try to talk to them like this. I even do that with the camera, so that a more warm, a more personable person comes out of me. So that's something you can do to, like, in the interview interaction also, is if you want to get all the body language right, and if you want to be charismatic, just think about your best friend who's sitting across to you and you're talking to them during the interview day. And in place of like whoever that person is, right? If there's a teacher that you would have bonded with, imagine Mr. X in place of whoever you're talking to, maybe may it be PD, and a charismatic body language will anyways come out. Now let's talk about mirroring and calibration. So there is this concept in psychology that we people tend to like people like us. For example, if I were an extrovert, I would tend to gravitate towards extroverts, right? I would want extroverts in my friend circle, of course, right? I want to hang out with those people because they enjoy the same activities as me, and we could enjoy them together. Versus an introvert, like, who just spends his whole day in his room, versus I want to go outside all the time. That would be a conflict. And there is, like, who would I like more, a person who's an extrovert or an introvert? If I were an extrovert, right? So that's where it comes back to, people like people who are like them. So the way we can do this is by mirroring other people, right? And the way we can mirror other people is take on, like, take on however they're talking to you, try to talk with them in that manner. For example, if they're talking a bit formalish, shift to talking a bit formalish. If the person next to you is fully casual, talk casually, right? Whatever, like, style they're using, of communication style they're using, do the same thing. If they're using their hands a lot, well, that's a good signal to use your hands a lot. If they're not using their hands at all, well, you might want to, like, go back, like, on the using hands too much. Smiling. So there are these things called mirror neurons. So what happens is, if you see a person smile, like, look at me, just me smiling, you want to smile too. The reason that happens is because I'm smiling, I'm activating your mirror neurons to smile also, because that signals peace, that signals, like, a truce. So that is something you can use to advantage. And the way I like to this do it like this is, I try to speak through a smile. I call it speaking through a smile. There's a really great channel on YouTube, it's called Pickup Lines, and it's by this really, really great lady who teaches cooking, and she talks through a smile like this. So, hi, my name is Pickup Lines, welcome back to the channel. Versus if I weren't smiling, hi, my name is Manik, welcome back to the channel, right? So if that makes sense, try to talk through a smile, because that just indicates friendliness, and they will reverse smile back on you because of the mirror neuron activation. Another thing I want you to do is reverse mirroring, right? So reverse mirroring is all about calibration. So copy whatever posture they have, how they use their hands when they blink. So it's very much in line with calibration. So just try to calibrate to whatever they are doing, and that would most of the times work in your favor. So now let's talk about vocal tonality. So this is going into the grounds of non-verbal verbal communication. What do I mean by non-verbal verbal communication? The way you speak something is more important than what you are speaking, right? For example, if I were to talk to you right now and I'm like, hey, I am doing my neurology rotation right now, versus, hey, I'm doing my neurology rotation right now, right? You could see that difference. In one, the first sentence, in the former, I was talking with a downwards tonality, which made me look more confident, versus the latter, where I was talking in an upwards tonality, which made me look nervous, as if I'm questioning myself, right? So there are three levels of tonality: seeking rapport, neutral rapport, and breaking rapport. And what you'll notice is, when you get nervous, as if you have to give a seminar in front of 1,000 people, what would start happening is you would go into what is called a seeking rapport, because that's what happens when you get nervous. That's just signaling I'm nervous right now, and it's just like a signal, an honest signal that your body is giving out that you're really not confident at that moment. So if I were to go into seeking rapport, it would be something like I am trying to like talk you into vocal tonality, because it's very important, because if you don't know vocal tonality, then the way you speak wouldn't look out to be good. And if you don't speak in a good way, well, whatever you're speaking won't have any value, right? So you could see that I was like, it was so irritating when I kept on going into that upward tonality, rather do like go somewhere between neutral and breaking rapport. So whenever I'm talking, you can see that my like the end of my sentence, like my tonality drops. This is called as breaking rapport. So like when you're in breaking rapport, you tend to sound very authoritative. So anywhere between neutral and breaking is a good place to be whenever you're communicating information. And the problem in seeking rapport is whenever I'm talking in seeking rapport, it sounds like I'm questioning myself all the single times. So please don't do that, right? Breaking rapport, remember, try to make the end of your sentence go down in tonality to sound more confident and authoritative. So I've already talked to you. So if confused about tonality, again, go back to thinking that in that interview day, you're actually talking to your best friend, or you're talking to some like teacher that used to inspire you. Because more often than not, when you're talking and you're comfortable and you're confident with your friends, you're talking in breaking rapport. And if you can do that, like if you can think that way, you will come out to use breaking rapport more often than just like trying to voluntarily do it, right? More often than not. Now, the right vocal speed. Understand that you can go very, very fast. Like I'm going very, very fast. A lot of people would be comfortable with it, because if you are speaking very, very fast, a lot of people do that, and like people who like are like them, right? Like we said. But if I go slow in talking, now I might lose your interest because it is just so boring. So remember, there's this two speeds, and try to go somewhere in the middle. Do interview practicing and see what comes naturally to you and go along with it. The same very much applies to your interviewer. If your interviewer is a bit fast in talking, you can take that route of talking where you are just a bit faster than your normal self. Versus if your interviewer is just a bit too slow, it is like it should be rather obvious to you that you should be talking in a slow tone if they are doing the same thing. Remember the concept of mirroring and calibration. Remember, one of the best things you can do is, please, like if you're confused about an answer, don't blutter crap that doesn't make sense, because that makes you look less professional. So what you can do is, just whenever you're gonna like go give an answer to a particular question and you're confused, take a deep breath, like diaphragmatic breath. So remember, diaphragmatic breaths, deep breath, take a full big breath and pause before your answers if you need to, because then it would at least come off as if you are like thought about that answer, and you would come off as more sincere than not, right? It is idiotic to go and say something where you are confused, but you just did not want to give that gap of thinking. So just come off with that answer with with the pause beforehand. Okay, it's okay. So remember eye contact. So they did a study recently, and in that study what they found out was there is a way to produce oxytocin in another person, which is also called the love hormone and the trust hormone, right? So there's a way to do that without physical contact. So if you go shake hands with a person, or if you hug them, it releases oxytocin, which is a sign of trust, which like makes the other person feel emotions such as trust and love in senses, right? So oxytocin, the love hormone, if you remember. You can also do the same thing through eye contact, and there's enough research behind this that you can actually, like, by giving the proper amount of eye contact, you are building trust, and you are also releasing oxytocin, which builds that trust. So remember that one of the best ways to do that, like release oxytocin, trust, connection in that person, is by looking into their eyes. So look into the camera lens. So if you have a webcam, look into the webcam lens. If you have a camera, look into the camera lens. Do not look at the screen. Now I can understand a lot of people would have this key, I want to like see the interviewer's expression, but how would I do that if I'm just looking into the camera? I know it's a tough situation, but like remind yourself of the fact that when you're looking at the screen, you're looking below the camera if you're using a webcam. And if you're looking below the camera, you're not building eye contact, you're not releasing the trust hormone, which is oxytocin, which is not recommended at all. So please look into the camera. Right now I'm looking into the camera, otherwise this would be so distracting. So go to eye contact. So remember, eyes are the windows to the soul. I know it's cliche, but it is true in a lot of ways. So good eye contact signals confidence, that you are not afraid of what you're going to say about, you're not like fearful of anything, that you actually believe what you are saying. Because if you were to lie, it's very hard to lie to a person by like when you're looking into their eyes, but it is right. Like if you think about it, so it signals that like trust, it signals that authenticity, it signals that you're confident in whatever you're saying. Also, when I look into your eyes, like just look into my windows to the soul, what happens is I capture your like attention and interest than if I were not doing this. And remember, a lot of the times eyes and eye contact is the way a lot of people remember you, and it is crucial to build a meaningful connection. Imagine never looking into your best friend's eyes and building a meaningful connection with them. I rest my case. Now, smiling. Understand, one of the best, like, don't smile like an idiot all the time like this, but smile as if, like, give a smile as if you were to smile with your parents, or as if you were to smile with your best friend or girlfriend or whoever, your spouse. So it signals a positive attitude and it shows confidence, because if I'm talking through a smile, as if like you can see right now, it means I'm happy, I'm signaling happiness in you by like activating the mirror neurons. So please talk through a smile, gives a lot of positive signals, a lot of positive effects to whatever you're speaking.